My name is Julie Marsh. I'm 66 years old, and I spent 6 years quietly paying off my son's mortgage while they called me family only when a bill came due. 2 days before the family cruise I'd waited a year for, my phone buzzed. Andrew. Mom, Lauren thinks it should just be real family this time. Hope you understand. Real family. I read it 4 times at my own kitchen table, the suitcase already packed by the door. I didn't call. I didn't cry. I set the phone down, poured my tea, and thought about one thing they'd both forgotten. The house they lived in, the house I'd paid for, was still legally mine. No transfer. No deed in their names. Just mine. By the time their ship docked back in port, everything they thought they owned would belong to someone else, and they'd have signed the proof themselves. The kitchen was already dark when I stopped reading the text a 4th time. I hadn't turned on the overhead light, just the small one above the stove, the one that hums when it's about to need a new bulb. My suitcase sat by the door, zipped, tagged, ready for a cruise that left in 2 days. I set the phone face down on the table next to my cold tea, and I sat there listening to the refrigerator cycle on. Real family. Andrew had actually typed those words and hit send. I didn't cry.
I want to be clear about that.
What I did was get up, walk to the hall closet, and pull down the shoebox where I keep my old phone. The one before this one, the one with 6 years of photos I never bothered to delete. I sat back down and started scrolling. Bella's 5th birthday. I found it by the timestamp, 6:47 p.m., a Saturday, and I remembered exactly where I'd been at 6:47 p.m. that day. Home. In this same kitchen, waiting for a call that never came until the next morning. "Oh, Mom, it kind of just happened last minute," Lauren had said on the phone, cheerful as anything. "You know how it is with kids' parties." I hadn't been invited. I'd been informed after the cake was already gone. I kept scrolling. The gender reveal party, pink and blue balloons in Lauren's sister's backyard, 40 people in the photos Lauren posted. I recognized none of the 40. I had not received an invitation. I had received, 3 weeks after, a group text with a photo attachment. "It's a girl?" I set the old phone down and picked up the current one. I opened my banking app because I already knew what I'd find there, and some stubborn part of me needed to see it laid out in black and white. $1,140. Mortgage payment, auto draft, the 4th of every month for 6 years. $340. Bella's piano lessons, paid directly to the instructor because Lauren had asked me to just handle that one if you don't mind. $6,200 from November, the roof. I remembered that one specifically because Andrew had called me about it, the only phone call in months that wasn't a text. "Mom, I hate asking," he'd said. "Don't be silly," I'd told him. "That's what family's for." I said it out loud now in the empty kitchen, testing how it sounded. It sounded like something I'd been reciting to myself for 6 years, so I wouldn't have to look too closely at the arithmetic. I went to every kitchen table event as a scheduling afterthought. I went to every financial event as the first call. There is a word for a person loved that unevenly, and I had spent a long time refusing to say it, even privately. I thought about the day they moved in. 6 years ago, almost to the month. Andrew had been 32 then, Lauren 30. Both fresh off a rejected mortgage application because Andrew's credit wasn't quite there and Lauren had student loans stacked from her marketing degree. I remembered sitting in a loan officer's office on Birchwood Avenue, signing my name on paperwork I barely read because my son looked so tired of renting. "We'll get it transferred into our names once Andrew's credit clears up," Lauren had told me, standing in the empty living room with paint swatches taped to the wall. "Give it a year, maybe 2. "That's fine," I'd said.
No rush.
6 years. No rush had become no mention. Not once. Not at Thanksgiving, not at Christmas, not on the phone. I used to think it was an oversight, the kind of thing busy young parents just let slip. Sitting there now, I understood it differently. Nobody forgets something for 6 straight years by accident. You forget it because remembering it doesn't benefit you. I got up and went to the hall closet again, this time reaching to the back, behind the winter coats, where I keep a metal file box I haven't opened in years. My knees complained going down to the floor. I found the key taped under the lid, the way I always do, because I forget where else to put it. Inside, beneath old tax returns and my late husband's discharge papers, there was a folder, yellowed at the edges, the paper gone soft the way paper does after 6 years in a closet. I turned it over and read the name typed across the top of the deed. I sat very still on the closet floor, because I realized neither Andrew nor Lauren had thought about that name in a very long time. I stood up off the closet floor, the deed still in my hand, and I did something I hadn't done in 6 years. I picked up the phone and called for an appointment instead of waiting to be asked. Marcus Reyes had done the closing on my last house, back before I moved into the condo on 5th, and his office still smelled the same, coffee and toner, and the leather of old chairs. He came out to the waiting room himself, reading glasses pushed up into gray hair. "Julie Marsh," he said. "It's been a while." 6 years, I said. Give or take. His office had a window facing the parking lot, and I sat with the folder in my lap while he pulled up the county records on his monitor. I watched his face more than the screen. That's a habit from 30 years of watching customers decide whether they liked a quilt before they said so out loud. "Okay," he said, scrolling. 1422 Birchwood Avenue. He turned the monitor slightly so I could see it too, though I already knew what it would say. I'd read the deed twice on the closet floor before I ever picked up the phone. Sole owner, Julie and Marsh. Mortgage satisfied. Looks like it closed out 14 months ago. He glanced at me. "You paid that off?"
I did.
$11.40 a month, every 4th of the month, for 6 years. There's no second name on this. No transfer, no quitclaim, nothing filed. He leaned back. "Your son and daughter-in-law live there?" 6 years now. Bella's whole life. Near enough. They're not on the deed. Not on the mortgage that closed. Legally speaking, Mrs. Marsh, they're occupants. Family occupants, but occupants. He said it carefully, the way you'd hand someone a hot dish without saying it was hot, waiting to see if I already knew. I did know. I'd known since the closet floor. But hearing it in a lawyer's flat voice, in a room with a ficus plant and a diploma from Ohio State, made it a fact instead of a feeling. My hands didn't shake. I noticed that and noticed myself noticing it. 6 years ago, they asked me to sign for the loan, I said. Andrew was 32, Lauren was 30, and his credit wasn't there yet, and she'd just started at the new company. They said give it a year, maybe 2, and they'd refinance it into their names. I said fine. I looked at the folder in my lap instead of at him. I don't think either of them has thought about that piece of paper since the day we signed it. I thought about it every 4th of the month. Marcus took his glasses off and set them on the desk, which I was starting to understand was what he did before he said something that mattered. I want to say something to you, as a friend of sorts, not just as your attorney. What you do with this is going to affect your family for a long time, in ways that don't show up in a title search. I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't say that first. I appreciate that. But if you're asking me the legal question, and I think you are, the answer is simple. You own that house outright. You can sell it, rent it, will it to the county zoo if you wanna. Nobody's name, but yours has to be on anything. I sat with that for a second. Outside his window, a woman was loading a car seat into the back of a minivan, wrestling with the buckle, patient in a way that looked like love. If I wanted to sell it, I said, what would I need to do to make sure every step was completely clean?
No shortcuts.
Nothing anyone could ever point to and call unfair. Marcus went still for a moment, not long, just a beat, like he was recalculating who was sitting across from him. You'd want a proper listing agent, not a for sale by owner situation. You'd want the property appraised at fair market value, not a favor price. Since there are occupants, even family occupants, you'd need to give them formal notice, written, dated, filed if it comes to that, same as any tenancy situation. Anything of theirs in the house, you'd arrange to have professionally moved and stored, inventoried, so no one can ever claim something went missing. Done that way, there's no gray area. It's all paper and dates. Paper and dates, I repeated. That's how you keep it clean, he said. That's how nobody can say you did anything but what you were entitled to do. I nodded slowly. I hadn't said I was doing it. I told myself I hadn't said that. I'd only asked a question, The way you might ask a doctor what a shadow on an X-ray could mean without agreeing yet that it was cancer. I'm not deciding anything today, I said, and I meant it when I said it. I understand, Marcus said, and I could tell from his face he didn't fully believe me, and I wasn't sure I believed myself either. I drove home with a folder on the passenger seat, the windows cracked, the June air smelling like cut grass off somebody's lawn. I was thinking about the woman and the car seat, about buckles that finally click into place after you fumble with them. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A bank notification, the kind I got maybe twice a month, usually for a grocery run or a gas fill-up on the card I'd given Andrew years ago for emergencies only. I stopped at the red light on 4th and looked down at it. Ocean Spa and Wellness, on-board purchase, $640. I sat at that light long after it turned green, somebody behind me tapping their horn, while I read the number a second time to make sure I hadn't misread a decimal point. The light turned green while I was still holding the phone, and I let the car behind me tap its horn a second time, before I moved. I set the phone in the cup holder, drove the last 4 blocks home, and put my keys in the bowl by the door before I let myself look at it again. Ocean Bliss Spa, $640 approved. I made tea I didn't drink, sat at the kitchen table where I'd been sitting the night before, and watched the phone light up again. Coral Reef Steakhouse, $312 approved. Then, 9 minutes later, Blue Horizon Jewelers, $890 approved. I picked up the phone, and my thumb hovered over the number for the credit card company. I had it memorized. 6 years of paying that card down to zero every month will do that to you. One call, 90 seconds, maybe less, and the card would be dead in Lauren's purse before she finished her drink. I didn't make the call. Instead, I sat there and watched the notifications come in the way you'd watch a slow drip fill a glass. Tidal Dive Excursions, $475. Cabana Bar, $86. Then Blue Horizon Jewelers again, a second charge, $1,240 this time. I thought about the ring case Lauren always lingered near in the mall, the one shaped like a little velvet clamshell. Every charge was a sentence, not one about money, about what I was to them. I picked up the phone that night and called Marcus. "You're up late," he said, and I could hear a baseball game behind him low. "I want to talk about listing the house," I said. "Officially. This week." There was a pause, the kind where I could hear him sit up. "Julie,
Take a breath.
you don't have to move fast." "I'm not moving fast," I said. "I've been standing still for 6 years. This is the first thing I've done in 6 years. He didn't argue with that. I was in his office by 9 the next morning, a legal pad in front of me instead of the shoebox I'd carried the first time. Marcus had a folder ready, durable power of attorney for the transaction, a market analysis he'd pulled overnight from a realtor he trusted, a woman named Priscilla O'Yelleran who worked estate sales and didn't put signs in yards. "Discreet," Marcus said, sliding her card across the desk. "No lockbox, no open house. She shows it by appointment only, to pre-qualified buyers. Given the family situation, I think that's wise." I turned the card over in my fingers. "And the house, everything in it. Their furniture, Bella's things. Legally, you can't just put it on the curb," he said. "You give written notice of the sale to any resident and you arrange licensed, bonded storage, full inventory, everything photographed and tagged, climate-controlled. It protects you if anyone ever claims something went missing or was damaged. It protects them too." "Good," I said. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I want to stop paying for people who forgot I'm someone to hurt." He looked at me for a second like he was deciding whether that sentence needed a response. He decided it didn't. By that afternoon, I'd signed the power of attorney. Priscilla came through the house with a clipboard while I stood in the doorway of Bella's room, looking at the pink lamp shaped like a seashell that I'd bought her for her 6th birthday. The one Lauren said clashed with the room and kept anyway because I'd paid for it. The moving crew came 2 days later, 3 men in matching navy shirts, and I stood on the lawn and watched them wrap Andrew's recliner in plastic, tag it, load it. One of them held up a clipboard for me to sign. Item 41, dining set. Item 52, a box marked B's art, keep flat in Andrew's handwriting. "That's everything logged so far," he said. "We'll finish the garage tomorrow." Should land us right around 55, 60 pieces total once we're through. I signed. All 40 pages. My phone buzzed once more that evening, a photo this time, not a receipt. Lauren on Instagram, in a white dress on the ship's top deck, glass raised, captioned living my best life with the people who actually show up for me. 41 likes already. I looked at it for longer than I meant to, then set the phone face down on the counter. They actually show up for you, I said to the empty kitchen, because you're paying for the boat. I didn't comment on the post. I didn't need to. The listing paperwork was spread across my kitchen table the next morning, pen already uncapped, the last blank line waiting for my signature, when the phone rang, a number I didn't recognize, area code local. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. Julie? The voice was thin, older, shaking in a way I didn't expect. It's Helen. Helen Doyle, Lauren's mother. I set the pen down. Julie, I need to tell you something my daughter has been hiding from everyone. Helen's hand found her purse strap and held it like a railing. She was let go in April, she said. Not laid off. Fired. They found out she'd been padding her expense reports for almost a year. I set my coffee down without drinking it. The cup made a small, hollow sound against the saucer. April, I said. That's 4 months. She still gets dressed every morning. Still leaves the house at 8:15. Helen's voice thinned out on the last word. She sits in the parking lot of the library on 5th Street. I found a receipt in her car. Parking validation. Every day. I thought of Lauren's captions. The steakhouse plate, the tag that said blessed, the new highlights she'd gotten in June. None of it had looked like a woman driving to a library parking lot to sit alone. Andrew doesn't know, Helen said. It wasn't a question, so I didn't answer it as one. There's a car loan, she went on. 11,000, some odd hundred. And 2 credit cards maxed past their limits. I've seen the statements. She leaves them on my counter sometimes like she wants me to say something and can't ask me to. She pressed a napkin under her eye without quite crying into it. She asked me for $4,000 in June. I gave her $1,500. I told Frank it was for Bella's dance recital costume. The espresso machine behind the counter hissed. Somewhere a chair scraped the floor, and I felt it in my back teeth. Julie, the cruise wasn't about the cruise. I looked at her. She needed you off that boat because she needed Andrew alone for 4 days.
No interruptions.
No phone calls to you for advice. Helen's jaw tightened. She's been telling him you're getting confused about money. That you might sign the house over easier if there's no, her word, noise. I felt something go very still and very cold in my chest, the way a room goes quiet right before you understand you're not imagining the smell of smoke. She wants the house, I said. She wants collateral. Helen said it like a woman reciting a diagnosis she'd already made peace with. A second mortgage, a home equity line, something with your name off it and hers on it. She's been asking a coworker's husband, a loan officer, what it would take. I heard her on the phone in my kitchen in June. She didn't know I was in the hallway. What exactly did you hear? Helen closed her eyes for a second, like she was replaying it. She said, if it's just Andrew's name and mine, we could pull 60, maybe 70 against it. She doesn't even check the mail half the time. Then she laughed. That laugh she does when she's proud of herself. I didn't say anything for a moment. I was doing math I hadn't let myself do, the birthday I missed, the gender reveal I found out about from a photo, the way Lauren had started calling the house our house at Thanksgiving. All of it lining up now into something with a shape and a purpose instead of just carelessness. I wondered, sitting there, how many other conversations had happened in kitchens and hallways I wasn't invited into. That question would sit in my stomach for the rest of the afternoon, unanswered. Show me, I said. Helen took her phone out of her purse, with a particular carefulness of someone handling something that might still burn her. She opened a thread and turned the screen toward me. Mom, can you send $500 today? We'll pay back after payroll fixes glitch. Mom, please. Andrew doesn't need to know about this one. I'll be fine once things settle. Just need breathing room. I read them twice. The second read didn't make them kinder. Payroll glitch, I said. There is no payroll glitch. Helen folded her hands on the table like she was praying or studying them. I couldn't tell which. There's a woman drowning and too proud to say the word. I should have felt something closer to pity. Instead, I felt the floor under 6 years settle into place, brick by brick, until I could see the whole structure of it. The ATM, the errand nobody thanked, the seat at the edge of the table I'd paid for and never gotten to keep.
Helen, I said.
Why are you telling me this? She's your daughter. Her eyes were wet, but her voice didn't shake. Because she's about to do something to you that she can't undo. And because she started again. Because Bella asked me last week why Grandma Julie never comes anymore. I didn't have an answer that didn't make me sick. I nodded. I didn't trust myself with words yet. Whatever you decide to do, Helen said, please think about that little girl. She didn't ask for any of this. I told her I would. I meant it. Helen looked down at her hands, then back up, and something in her face changed, the way a person looks right before they hand you something they've been carrying too long. There's one more thing. Her fingers tightened around her phone. 2 years ago, Lauren sent me an email. We'd had a fight about money, a bad one. She swallowed. In it, she wrote something. A line. You should read it before any lawyer of hers ever opens their mouth. The moving truck showed up on Wednesday, exactly as the paperwork specified. I watched from Priscilla's car parked 2 houses down while 2 men in gray uniforms carried the last of the boxes into the storage unit on 5th Street. 52 items, cataloged and sealed, each one photographed for the inventory sheet Priscilla insisted on. A cedar dresser Andrew had refinished the summer he turned 22. Bella's old crib, still in its original box, never assembled a second time because Lauren wanted new furniture for the nursery she never used. I didn't touch any of it myself. I signed where I was told to sign. The new owners, a young couple named Sasha and Ted Okafor, moved in on Thursday. I met them once at closing and shook Sasha's hand across the table. She had a baby on her hip and asked me if the maple tree in the backyard dropped a lot of leaves. I told her yes, every October, and that the previous owners had never once raked them. I wasn't there when the cruise ship docked. I heard about it from Andrew, who called me at 4:52 on Friday afternoon, his voice climbing before I even said hello.
Mom,
what did you do? Not a question. A demand dressed as one. I sold the house, Andrew. I was in my kitchen, the new one, boxes still stacked against the wall. I kept my voice level. It was mine to sell. There are people in our driveway. There's a woman putting up curtains in Bella's window. I could hear Lauren in the background, her voice pitched high and cracking, and then a third voice, unfamiliar, asking someone to please step off the porch. I need you to come here, Andrew said. Right now. I almost said no. I thought about hanging up and letting the locksmith's work speak for itself. But some old habit, some worn groove of being the one who shows up, put my keys in my hand before I decided anything. The drive took 11 minutes. When I pulled up, Lauren was standing in the middle of the front lawn in a sundress still creased from packing, sunglasses pushed up into her hair, screaming into her phone at what I assumed was a 911 dispatcher. She sold her house. She sold our house while we were on vacation. I don't know if that's a crime. That's why I'm calling you. Ted Okafor stood behind the storm door with his daughter on his hip, not opening it. Andrew came at me across the grass, and for a second I braced for something I'd never seen from him. But he just stood there, hands opening and closing at his sides, staring at the house like it might explain itself to him. How could you do this? I gave a required notice of residency change, I said. 30 days. It was mailed to this address on the 2nd. We were on a boat, Mom. I know where you were. I opened my bag and took out the folder Marcus had prepared. Deed, closing statement, the storage receipt with all 52 items itemized. I held it out. Lauren snatched it from my hand before Andrew could, flipping pages with her thumb like she was looking for a mistake to point at. A patrol car pulled up. A young officer, maybe 30, got out slow, one hand resting near his belt out of habit more than threat. Lauren ran to him before he'd cleared the car door. That woman defrauded us, she said, jabbing a finger at me. She's 66 years old. She's clearly not. She signed something. We don't even know what she signed. Somebody needs to look into whether she was even competent to. I felt something cold move through my chest.
Not fear exactly.
Recognition. I understood, in that moment, that Lauren had already decided which story she was going to tell, and that the story didn't need to be true to work. It only needed a badge to hear it first. The officer looked at me, then at the folder in Lauren's hand, then back at me. Ma'am, is this your legal residence? It was until Monday, I said. I have documentation.
She's lying, Lauren said.
There was a family agreement. Verbal. Everybody knew this house was going to us eventually. Ask anyone. Ask Andrew's father before he. She stopped herself, recalibrated. There was an understanding. The officer's eyes moved to Andrew, waiting for him to confirm or deny. Andrew said nothing. He looked at the house, at the strangers behind the glass, at his own hands. I stood there holding a folder of clean paperwork, 14 months of paid-off mortgage statements, a deed with only my name typed across the top in black ink, and I watched the officer's expression settle into something careful and non-committal, the look of a man who didn't know yet who the victim was supposed to be. For one long second, with the sprinklers ticking on somewhere behind the hedges and Lauren's voice still ringing in the yard, I wondered if I had misjudged how this would look from the outside. The paper was mine. The story wasn't, not anymore. 3 days later, a letter arrived from a law office on Marsh, no relation, just a coincidence of names, signed by an attorney named Diane Kowalczyk, informing me that her clients intended to pursue their rightful claim to the property at Birchwood Avenue, and that she was, in her words, fully confident she could prove a long-standing family agreement to transfer the home once it went to trial. She had no idea what she was about to find in her own client's inbox. The deposition room smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner. I sat beside Marcus at a long table in a glass-walled office on the 9th floor, watching Lauren across from us in a navy blazer that still had the fold lines from the store. Diane Kowalczyk cleared her throat. My clients moved into that home on the understanding, the family understanding, that it would become theirs. Mrs. Marsh's own conduct over 6 years supports that. She paid the mortgage. She never asked for rent. She paid the mortgage, Marcus said, because it was her house. Lauren's lawyer kept going, building her story brick by brick. 6 years of goodwill, an aging mother-in-law who never objected, a family that operated on trust instead of paperwork. I watched Lauren nod along like she believed it herself. Maybe she did by now. Then Marcus opened a folder and slid a single page across the table. I'd like to enter this into the record, he said. An email sent from Lauren Marsh's personal account, dated June 14th, 2 years ago, to Helen Doyle. Lauren's head came up fast. Marcus read it out loud, flat and unhurried, the way you'd read a grocery list. The house is Julie's. It has always been Julie's. There has never been any agreement to put it in our names, so stop making things up. The room went quiet enough that I heard the air conditioning cycle on. Diane leaned over Lauren's shoulder to read the screen Marcus had turned toward them. I watched the color leave Lauren's face in stages, first her cheeks, then something around her mouth, like a light going out room by room. That email was private, Lauren said. That was an argument. Context matters. It's time-stamped, Marcus said. It's from your own account. And it says exactly what it says. I hadn't known, until that second, that Lauren had ever said the truth out loud to anyone. Not to me, not to Andrew, only to her mother, in anger, 2 years before any of this. Diane asked for a break. Her voice had lost its polish. While the court reporter stopped the machine, Marcus reached into the folder again and set down a second stack, thinner, stapled at the corner. While we're at it, he said, I'd also like copies of these credit card statements in the record. Ocean Bliss Spa, $640. Coral Reef Steakhouse, $312. Blue Horizon Jewelers, $1,240. All charged during the cruise your clients say I lured them into leaving me out of. All charged to a card in my name. Diane didn't answer that one. She was already gathering papers, telling Lauren they needed 5 minutes. I didn't smile. I didn't feel anything I'd call triumph. I felt the way I used to feel finishing a hard seam, that click when two pieces of fabric that never should have lined up suddenly do. Andrew hadn't said a word through any of it. He sat beside Lauren with his hands flat on the table, staring at the printed email like it was in a language he was only now learning to read. Something moved behind his eyes, not surprise exactly. Recognition. The kind that comes late and costs you. We broke for 15 minutes. I stepped out into the hallway to let the air conditioning off my skin and to not have to watch Lauren's face rearrange itself into whatever came next. I stood by the water fountain, running the numbers again in my head. 14 months since the mortgage was paid off, 6 years of $1,140 a month, the roof repair in November that had cost $6,200, the $340 for Bella's dance lessons that I'd never once asked Andrew or Lauren to cover. None of it had ever been a loan. I had never once called it a loan. That was the part nobody in that conference room seemed to understand, that a mother doesn't keep a ledger until someone tries to take the things she was never keeping score for. Andrew followed me out. He stood in front of me, hands in his pockets, not quite meeting my eyes at first. "Mom," he said, "I didn't know she wrote that. I swear I didn't know." I waited. I'd learned, these past weeks, that waiting was its own kind of answer. I've been telling myself for 2 years that I never got a straight answer out of anyone about that house, he said. Turns out there was one. I just wasn't the one she gave it to. His voice cracked on the last word, small and real, the first unrehearsed thing he'd said to me since the text message on his phone that started all of this. "I should have asked you," he said. "A long time ago. I should have asked you what you needed instead of just assuming you'd keep giving it." I thought about Bella, 5 years old, blowing out candles at 6:47 on a Saturday evening, 3 years before any of this began, before her mother had a reason to lie and her father had a reason to look away. I thought about the mortgage statement with the number 4 on it every month for 6 years, never late, never mentioned. I didn't say any of that to Andrew. I just nodded, once, and let him stand there in it. Behind him, through the glass wall of the conference room, I could see Lauren standing with her back to us, phone pressed to her ear, one hand cupped around her mouth like she didn't want the words carrying. I couldn't hear what she was saying. I could only see her shoulders tight and fast, the particular urgency of someone who has just realized the ground under her has a name on the deed that isn't hers, and one phone call left to make before someone finds out who she's calling. She didn't come back to the deposition room. Diane returned alone, folder tucked under her arm, and asked for a private word with Marcus in the hallway. Through the glass, I watched them talk. Marcus's face didn't move much. That was how I knew we'd won. "They want to settle," he told me 20 minutes later, back in the small conference room, the coffee gone cold in its paper cup. "Before this goes any further." I asked what that meant. "It means Laura knows a judge would see that email the same way I did," he said. "It means Diane knows it too." We met again 11 days later. All of us, at a long table in Marcus's office on Birchwood Avenue, the kind of table meant for people who no longer trust each other to sit close. Andrew came in first, in a gray sweater I didn't recognize, and sat where I couldn't quite see his eyes. Lauren came in behind him, thinner than she'd been on the ship, holding a coffee she didn't drink. Marcus laid out the terms the way he'd laid out everything else with me, plainly, without decoration. "Mrs. Marsh will reimburse the actual contributions made by Andrew and Lauren toward the household over the 6-year period," he said. "Utilities, groceries during shared periods. That comes to $5,700, verified against bank records." Lauren's mouth tightened at the number. It was so much smaller than what she'd been hoping for. I watched her do the math behind her eyes and lose. "And," Marcus continued, "Mrs. Marsh will establish an educational trust in Bella's name.
$62,000.
Administered by a third-party trustee. Inaccessible to either parent. It becomes available to Bella only on her 18th birthday for education expenses." "Inaccessible to either parent," Lauren repeated. Her voice had gone very flat. "So I can't." "No," Marcus said. "Neither of you can borrow against it, adjust it, or dissolve it. That's the point." I hadn't planned to speak, but I did. "This isn't about you, Lauren. Or Andrew. It's for her." I kept my hands folded on the table so no one would see them shake. I'm not going to make my granddaughter pay for what happened between the rest of us. Andrew looked at me then, and something in his face loosened, the way a held breath finally goes out of a person. "Thank you," he said, quiet enough that I almost missed it. Lauren didn't say, "Thank you." She signed where Diane pointed, her pen pressing hard enough that I heard the paper scratch, and when she pushed the folder back across the table, her hand lingered on it a half-second too long, like she was still doing arithmetic she couldn't make work. I thought of Helen's kitchen, the $11,000 in car debt, the $4,000 Lauren had asked her own mother for, and the $1,500 Helen had actually handed over. $60,000, sitting untouchable for 10 years, while whatever Lauren owed kept collecting interest in the dark. I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt something colder and more useful. I understood, finally, exactly what she'd wanted from me, and exactly why she wasn't getting it. Andrew signed last. His signature was smaller than I remembered. Afterward, in the parking lot, Marcus walked me to my car. The asphalt was still warm under my shoes, late afternoon light flattening, everything gold. "You didn't have to give them anything," he said. "Legally, you could have walked away clean." "I know. So, why the $5,700? I thought about it before I answered because I wanted the true reason, not the easy one. Because I don't want to win by becoming someone who takes everything. I just wanted to stop being someone who gives everything. I looked back at the office building, at the tinted glass where I could still make out three shapes standing far apart from each other. "There's a difference." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's not really about the money, is it?" "No," I said. "It's about not being the thing that burns down to keep other people warm." He didn't answer that. He just opened my car door for me, the way he had every visit, and told me he'd send the final trust documents by the end of the week. For 3 months, that was the whole of it. Andrew called on Sundays. Bella sent me a drawing of a house with too many windows and my name written above the door in crooked purple letters. I let myself believe, carefully, that the worst of it was behind us. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in November, my phone rang while I was pinning a quilt square to the design wall in my sewing room, and Andrew's voice came through before I'd even gotten the phone to my ear, fast and cracked in a way I had never once heard from him.
"Mom."
Lauren took Bella. Nobody knows where she is. Andrew's voice was already breaking apart. "She took Bella. She's not answering. I called her mother. I called..." A pause, ragged. "Mom, I think she's heading for the border." I stood in my kitchen with the phone against my ear, the coffee I'd poured 20 minutes ago gone cold on the counter. "Which border, Andrew?" "Texas plates." Bella's school called because she never showed up this morning. I checked the bank app. Lauren pulled $800 from an ATM in Laredo at 6:15. I didn't shout. I set my free hand flat on the counter and felt the grain of the wood, cool and steady under my palm. "Call the police."
"Now."
"Then call them again in 20 minutes. Don't let them file it as a custody dispute. Say abduction. Say flight risk." "I already." "Then do it again."
He did.
At 11:40 that morning, a Customs and Border Protection officer at the Laredo Port of Entry ran the plate on a gray Honda Accord and found a flag Andrew's second call had put there an hour before. Lauren was pulled into secondary inspection with Bella asleep in the back seat, a booster seat cushion creased against her cheek, a half-eaten bag of pretzels on the floor mat. Bella wasn't scared, the officer told Andrew later. She thought it was an adventure. She asked if they were going to see the ocean. Andrew told me all of it standing in my old kitchen, the one I no longer owned, 3 days after, because I'd driven over to sit with him while the family court paperwork piled up on his table. His hands shook around his coffee mug. She said she was going to start over somewhere Lauren's family couldn't reach her. She said the money, the fund. She said if she couldn't touch it, none of us could have Bella either. I didn't say I told you so. There was nothing satisfying left in that sentence by then. The courtroom smelled like carpet cleaner and old coffee. I sat 2 rows behind Andrew and watched Marcus Reyes lean over to whisper something to him before the judge came in, steady him. Maybe, the way you'd steady a table with a folded napkin under one leg. When the judge asked Andrew why he'd flagged the crossing himself instead of waiting, his voice cracked once and then held. Because I knew if I waited, I'd talk myself out of it. She's my wife, but Bella's my daughter. The judge didn't take kindly to a parent driving a sleeping 8-year-old across state lines during active litigation. Lauren lost primary custody that afternoon. She was granted supervised visitation, 2 hours every other Saturday, a beige room, a court monitor with a clipboard taking notes she never let anyone read, and a mandated course of therapy she was still, 6 months later, showing up to. Andrew filed for divorce in March. It was final by July. Bella moved in with her father in the house he rented 3 streets over from the Birchwood house. Not the same street, never the same street again. And every other Friday, I picked her up in my new car, a pale blue Subaru with seat warmers I still hadn't figured out how to turn off, and drove her to my apartment on the 7th floor with a sliding glass door that opened onto a balcony and, past the balcony, the ocean. She liked to sit on that balcony and watch the water while I worked. I'd taken my machine out of storage, the same Bernina I'd used to piece 100 quilts nobody in my family had ever once asked to see finished, and I was making a quilt now for no one but myself, deep blues and one thread of gold running crooked through all of it, because I liked the way it looked, not because anyone had a baby coming or a birthday to mark. Bella sat cross-legged on the rug and sorted my scraps by color, humming. "Grandma," she said one Friday, holding up a square of navy cotton, "why do you live here now instead of the old house?" I threaded the machine before I answered. Because the old house wasn't really mine to live in anymore. Not the way it should have been. She considered that with the seriousness only an 8-year-old can manage, then went back to sorting scraps. Helen calls most weeks. She came for lunch in April, sat across from me at my little table with the ocean going gray-green behind her, and told me Lauren was living with a cousin in Corpus Christi now, working retail, still going to the mandated sessions. She asks about Bella every time, Helen said. I don't know what to tell her anymore. I didn't either. I'm not the one who owes her comfort. Andrew comes on Sundays sometimes just to sit. He fixed the sliding door track without being asked. He doesn't bring anything up unless I do, and I've stopped needing him to apologize out loud. I can see it now in the small things, the way he calls before he visits instead of assuming, the way he asks what I want instead of what's convenient. People ask me if I regret it. The house, the lawyers, the quiet arithmetic of walking away. I don't. If I'd stayed the family bank account with a pulse, we'd still be circling each other in that kitchen, me writing checks, them writing me out. Some families only heal after somebody stops holding them up. I finished the quilt in June, gave it to no one, kept it on my own bed, where I sleep now, in a house that is entirely, legally, undeniably mine.